because instead of looking at humans as a bag of filth, what about defining a viral load and then cutting the head off the sucker if it were a comparison to a human being? So to say that in the olden days they had food that was more organic, and then nowadays junk food has made an entrance into the buyer shelves of a consumer's diet, but how much so? And in doing so, how is that frequently being acknowledged as a part of your body just as though? And so what robots are is a metallic outskirt. Doesn't really matter what metal it's of or how it's welded. The kind of argument of what's under the hood, it doesn't matter what the hood actually is. So in the definition of what a robot is, the SSD drive of computers is something that spins, and you can just leave it at that. If you're being broad and beating around the bushes, anything that spins is subject to being an SSD drive. Well, for sure. But to be called a robot, that would be like its cardiovascular system. There's no argument that there's technology where robots are a synthetic life force that is plentiful in making itself reproduct. They've achieved an ability for robots to reproduct, and that made headlines all over the internet. Well, how did they do that? Well, the moon is a real thing, but to say that it is producing an illumination is a two-way street. It illuminates, but only because it's a reflectant. It's a reflecting the illumination of the sun. But someone who is on Earth and didn't know what the sun was would think that you're gotta be crazy. Look how bright the moon is shining. Of course it's illuminating. And so you see the traversal of the moon just being a rock. It doesn't have anything within its center, fusion making the solar radiation outwards. If you were to be told that, like, a pregnant woman having junk food, so much of it would lead to a miscarriage because she had a bad back, you'd be thinking, man, that's some really bad junk food that she must have been getting herself into or binging off from. But that's easier to think that that's a reality than a man having a baby. There was like this lady in the courtroom. She was representing, the Democrats, and she was getting asked these questions really serious, and she had the doctor friends around her. This lady pronounced herself so well, but then she couldn't answer a question of what was the latest rate. And this is so disgusting. Like, I feel like safe I can talk about an abortion, but the moment I talk about melanin, it's one way that an algorithm pings and is not as bad, but almost as worse as talking about voting. And if it's not even a thing, as opposed to a selection that's pre-made, preordained. The lady, she said that guys can have babies, of course, and then maybe there's some mathematics in science where that's a possibility, but you would have to be transporting and transplanting and cutting and sewing like a Frankenstein. So you're just using their corpse and then putting in with this whole bunch of sewing and grabbing intestines and other things, so that the quality of life isn't even a question. It's just, can a man keep his chromosomes and then have everything gutted out and thrown in whatever else to make that statement true, is almost as if you're trying to make a moon into a star, which you could like carve out and dig a hole and drill in and throw in a whole bunch of lava and other things that would excite the lava enough to make a core of the moon collapse into itself to then create a star. Like, you could do that, but I mean, like, at that point you're talking about some doctorate degree science construction, and at that point it's a lot more believable that a woman could have gotten a bad batch of Cheetos and it disabled her and she had a miscarriage. But back to junk food. So in the olden days, people were stronger because they ate not junk food. So in modern day time, what kind of detriments would that have when being backed up with your health? Well, in a lack of nutrition, as a kid, you're told not to judge a book by its cover. What this would mean is cell life. How does the makeup of a body define, and if you're a robot or a zombie, your corpse would be a zombie, and then the robot would just be like a tin can. How does that interplay under the conditions of the following? Expanding a spring outwards, and so it's a cylinder, and then you're saying that this cylinder is a representation of a tornado at a still frame. You would have to expand the bottom of the tornado outward so it has two vertical lines. That would be a representation of a spring stretched. It has a potential energy just as the tornado would if it were frozen in time and expanded from its point that it's touching its ground, the skinny one, outwards. That's important because the transfer of that wind pressure can be represented as a bag, a parabola about the entire tornado. This is impressive because a conic section comes into play at the midpoint of a parabola and is like then a foci of your transformation. That foci has a designation inside a tornado because there's always an eye of a tornado, and with that you've got a really rich quantity, that of which could be used to read stuff like cancer or Alzheimer's from cancer, or
say when.